And thehill.com's got a representation of the polling. Here's the important part. Just my little opinion. 75% of respondents who identified as Democrats say they strongly or somewhat support a ban on lawmaker stock trading. 76% of independents, third-party survey takers, and 70% of Republican respondents agree. And they all agree that lawmakers shouldn't be stock pickers, nor should their spouses. And this is actually, and this might shock some of you, outside of the day traders out there listening to the devil's advocates all day. This one already passed the Senate. This bill passed the Senate. This bill has bipartisan support.
What?
And you know where it's jammed up at? Nancy Pelosi won't let the House vote on it.
Are you serious?
Oh, I'm absolutely serious.
Yeah.
And Nancy Pelosi and her husband, they've done okay with their stock picking, let's just say.
Was that wrong?
Well, it's currently not illegal. And even if you cross a line, let's just say, there are minuscule fines. It's a slap on the wrist at worst. So anyways, the headline there, like 2/3 of Americans, but if it's 76% of Democrats and like 70% of Republicans and something similar of independents, that's more than 2/3 of Americans, unless there's some undesignated column I'm unaware of in the crosstabs. But that's a lot of Americans. That's over 70% of Americans, with or without the A. They think it's corrupt. They don't want to see their electeds benefiting because, we can all have our little, mutual funds or a 401k, but it's different when you're picking individual stocks. And you can be, let's just say, accused of having a conflict of interest because sometimes lawmakers, they're privy to information you and I just don't know. Sometimes classified. Sometimes they are aware, perhaps the president's going to push an agenda come down the pike. And if you invested, let's say, in Tesla or electric vehicle stocks, because the president was pushing his new electric vehicle agenda, well, you might see a nice bump in your stock portfolio. So there is one person currently blocking this legislation, bipartisan legislation, and it's Nancy Pelosi. And I don't know if you know, but she's worth a lot of money. Here's a headline. This an opinion piece over at the Daily Beast about the 100 million reasons why no one trusts Nancy Pelosi. I'll read. Democrats have the opportunity to do something that is good for the country that would be commonsensical and populist. So why won't Nancy Pelosi let them? I'm talking about the Ban Congressional Stock Trading Act, introduced by Democratic Senators Mark Kelly and John Ossoff. This legislation, like a similar bill offered by Republican Josh Hawley, that guy, would prohibit members of Congress and their families, such as Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, from buying and selling stocks while they serve. It would help combat the growing consensus that the game is rigged for the powerful and connected, a sentiment shared by top Biden economic advisor Brian Deese. Indeed, among some observers, the idea that top political leaders aren't engaged in insider trading has become a joke. As NPR's Tim Mack recently reported, and here's a quote, among a certain community of individual investors on TikTok, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's stock trading disclosures are a treasure trove. In fact, Mack writes, you can get a push notification every time Pelosi's stock trading disclosures are released. First, though, a brief and recent history of the toxic problem it is. In the midst of the financial meltdown, you remember that, Fancy Brian? Let's call it September 16th, 2008. Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson and Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke held a secret meeting with members of Congress. The result, as Business Insider noted, was that congressmen privy to this information reacted, not by dropping everything and drawing up a plan to save the economy, but by dumping stock in avoiding the losses everyone else would take in the coming month. Others bought stocks in financial firms that would later be saved by the federal government. Does that bother you? Because it bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, especially since we spent an entire 4 years railing against Trump about the emoluments clause and, putting out profiting from the presidency, things like that. I think it's kind of hypocritical.
The 2008 events were detailed in a 2011 book, Peter Schweitzer's Throw Them All Out, which in turn inspired a segment on 60 Minutes. But the story wasn't just about the financial meltdown. One of the politicians featured in the segment was Nancy Pelosi, who participated in the 2008 initial public offering from Visa. As 60 Minutes noted, just as troublesome piece of legislation that would have hurt credit card companies began making its way through the House undisturbed by a potential conflict of interest, the Pelosi's, whose net worth is well over $100 million, purchased 5,000 shares of Visa at the initial price of $44. 2 days later, it was trading at $64. Ooh, that's a nice little bump. The credit card legislation never made it to the floor of the House. And it is a bipartisan problem, and Pelosi was far from the only lawmaker featured in that memorable 60 Minutes episode that helped spark passage of the Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge, the Stock Act, if you will, a flawed piece of legislation codifying that it is illegal for members of Congress to use any non-public information derived from the individual's position or gained from performance of the individual duties for personal benefit. At least that's what the law is supposed to do. The real test would come during the next crisis, which turned out to be the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the law, members of Congress who received coronavirus briefings in early 2020 made suspicious stock trades just after they found out, just ahead of the public in the markets, how bad the pandemic could be. Despite the Stock Act, none of the members received any serious punishment. There's more. Matt Lewis wrote this piece at the Daily Beast. I'm just sharing some of it with you. We need a little reset. Joe Biden needs to do something different. How about we reset? We lead with some ethics. How about that? And how about you call the Speaker's office and you encourage her to bring the Stock Act to the floor? The new improved version. Because my speaker, your speaker, our speaker shouldn't be picking stocks, nor should her husband, to their own personal benefit.